I am a 38-year-old woman. My husband, Mark, died 2 weeks ago. Today was his memorial service. I sat in the front row, a widow in a black dress that felt too tight around my chest. Next to me sat our son, Leo. He is 20. He did not hold my hand. He did not look at me. He sat next to his grandmother, my mother-in-law, Eleanor. She was the one he turned to for comfort. She was the one he called Mom. The service was a blur of kind words from people who barely knew Mark. They spoke of his work, his hobbies, his easy smile. They did not speak of the shadows in his eyes, or the way he always deferred to his mother. They did not know the man I knew. Eleanor was the last person to speak before me. She stood at the podium, a portrait of grieving matriarchal strength. She spoke for a long time. She talked about Mark as a little boy, her little boy. She talked about how she raised him, guided him, and even, she said, raised his own son when he was unable. Her eyes swept over the crowd, landing on me for just a second. It was a look of triumph. She was erasing me from my own husband's story. When she finished, there was polite applause. The officiant then called my name. I walked to the podium, my legs shaking. I looked out at the faces. I saw my friend Sarah in the third row, giving me a small, encouraging nod. I saw Mark's sister, Chloe, looking uncomfortable. And I saw Leo, my son, staring at his phone, completely disengaged. My heart cracked just a little bit more. I opened my mouth to speak, to share a memory of the man I had loved, the boy I had met when we were just teenagers. Before I could say a single word, a voice cut through the quiet church. "Wrap it up, Grandma," it was Leo. He was speaking to Eleanor, a smirk on his face, a private joke between them about her long speech. But then his eyes flicked to me, cold and dismissive. He did not need to say my name. The message was clear. My turn to speak was an inconvenience. My grief was a footnote. My existence was an afterthought. The room was silent. Everyone was waiting. Eleanor put a hand on his arm, a gesture that looked like a reprimand, but was really a reward. She was proud of him, proud of his cruelty. In that moment, something inside me shifted. For 20 years, I had been quiet. I had accepted the story she wrote for our family. I had endured the pain of being a mother who was not allowed to be a mother. I had kept the peace for Mark's sake. But Mark was gone, and the peace had only ever been for them. It had never been for me. I looked at Leo, this boy I had given birth to, this stranger who wore my husband's face. I thought of a little boy's voice, saved on my phone for over a decade. A voice trembling with tears, begging me for a rescue that never came. I made a decision. They thought I was a ghost at their family gathering. They were about to find out how loud a ghost can be. I cleared my throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the hushed room. I did not read the speech I had prepared. I did not talk about Mark's love for fishing or the time we went to the Grand Canyon. I looked directly at my son. "Leo," I said, my voice steady, far steadier than I felt. "There is something you need to hear." Then I reached into my purse. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was not from grief. It was from a cold, hard resolve that had been 20 years in the making. The story of how I lost my son began not with a fight, but with a promise. I was 18 when I had Leo. Mark was 20. We were kids, really, living in a tiny apartment, dizzy with love and overwhelmed by the reality of a baby. Mark was smart and ambitious, and when he was offered a 2-year engineering contract in Dubai, it felt like winning the lottery. It was enough money to buy a house, to build a future, to give Leo everything we never had. There was only one problem.
It was a single status contract.
No families allowed. "It's only for 2 years, Laura," Mark had said, his eyes shining with excitement. "We can do it. It will fly by." We sat at his mother's pristine dining table to discuss the plan. Eleanor served tea in delicate cups that I was afraid to break. She listened patiently, a thoughtful frown on her face. "It's a wonderful opportunity for Mark," she said, her voice smooth and reasonable. "But what about Leo? You can't take a baby to a foreign country by yourself, Laura. You have no support system there." I explained that I would stay here, with Leo. I would get a job and we would manage. But Eleanor shook her head. That's not practical, dear. You'd be a single mother, struggling. Mark would be worried sick. It would affect his work. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I have a suggestion. One that solves everything. Her proposal was simple. She and Mark's father would take on temporary legal guardianship of Leo, just for the 2 years. It was just a piece of paper, she said, to make things easier for school enrollment and doctor's visits. She would care for him in her large, comfortable home. We could save every penny Mark earned. When he came back, we would be set for life. We would take Leo back, and it would be as if no time had passed at all. It makes sense, Mark said, looking at me, willing me to agree. He was so caught up in the dream of the future that he couldn't see the danger in the present. I was hesitant. The thought of being away from my baby for 2 years was a physical pain. But I was young, and I was in love. I trusted Mark, and Mark trusted his mother. I looked at Eleanor, who smiled at me with such warmth, such reassurance. He will be my precious grandbaby, she said. I'll love him like my own. You can visit anytime. You can call every day. I was naive. I believed her. I signed the papers. The first few months were the hardest. I cried every night. Mark called from Dubai, full of stories about his new job, assuring me we had done the right thing. I visited Leo every weekend. At first, it was fine. He would run to me, his little arms wrapped tight around my neck. But slowly, things began to change. Eleanor would find reasons why my visits weren't convenient. He has a playdate this Saturday, dear. He's feeling a bit under the weather. It's best not to excite him. The visits became shorter, more supervised. The phone calls became strained. Eleanor would often answer, telling me Leo was busy or napping. When I did get to speak to him, he sounded distant. He started calling me Laura. Grandma says it's my special name for you, he explained once, his 5-year-old voice serious. My blood ran cold. I confronted Eleanor about it. She laughed it off. Oh, Laura, you're being so sensitive. It's just a phase. Don't make a fuss, Mark, on the phone from thousands of miles away, echoed her. Mom knows what she's doing, Laura. Don't cause trouble. The 2 years came and went. Mark's contract was extended for another year. I begged him to come home. He told me to be patient. The money was too good to pass up. By then, the wall Eleanor had been building between me and my son was complete. My visits were rare. When I showed up, Leo would hide behind Eleanor's legs, looking at me like I was a stranger. Eleanor would watch, her face a mask of false sympathy. He's just so settled here, dear. It's hard for him when you pop in and out. It confuses him. Then came the final blow. I hired a lawyer to revoke the guardianship. That was when I found out the truth. The papers I had signed were not for temporary guardianship. Somewhere in the fine print, with legal language I hadn't understood, was a clause that allowed her to petition for full adoption after a period of time if the parents were deemed unable to provide a stable home. She had used Mark's absence and my struggle to find decent work as proof of our instability. A judge, seeing a child in a wealthy, stable home versus with a young mother living in a small apartment, had granted it. Mark had consented. He had signed his own papers in Dubai, without telling me. His mother had convinced him it was for Leo's own good, to give him a consistent maternal figure. When I confronted Mark on the phone, he was defensive. She's right, Laura. Look at his life. He has everything.
What could we give him right now?
It's not permanent. It's just until I get back, but it was permanent. We were divorced a year later. Mark came home, but he didn't come home to me. He moved back in with his mother, into the house where my son was being raised to believe I was nothing more than a distant relative who had given him up. I fought. I spent every cent I had on lawyers, but the system was not on my side. I was the young, unstable mother. She was the established, loving grandmother who had stepped in to save a child. The story was perfect, and she told it to everyone who would listen. Over the years, I tried to maintain a connection with Leo. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents. Most were returned unopened. The few times I saw him at forced family gatherings, he was polite but distant, always under Eleanor's watchful eye. He had been taught to see me as a source of drama, a problem his father and grandmother had to manage. The voicemail came when Leo was 7. It was a Tuesday night. I had called, as I sometimes did, just to hear his voice on the answering machine. But this time he picked up. Eleanor must have been out. His voice was small and shaky. "Laura," he had whispered. "Is that you?" I told him it was. And then he started to cry. A gut-wrenching sob that I felt in my own bones. "Why don't you want me anymore?" he asked. "Grandma says you gave me away because you didn't love me. But I miss you. Can you come and get me? I'll be good. I promise. Please come and take me home." He was sobbing so hard he could barely speak. Then I heard Eleanor's voice in the background, sharp and angry. The line went dead. I saved that message. I listened to it 1,000 times. It was the only proof I had that the boy I knew was still in there, buried under years of poison. It was a reminder that he had not left me. He had been stolen. And now, at his father's memorial, the man who had helped steal him was looking at me with cold indifference, telling me my grief was taking up too much time. I gripped my phone. The smooth, cool glass a stark contrast to the fire burning in my chest. The time for silence was over. The time for the truth had finally come. After the memorial, we all went back to Eleanor's house for the wake. It was the house Mark had grown up in, the house where my son had been raised. It felt like walking onto a stage set for a play where I was the villain. People I had known for years averted their eyes, offering me tight, uncomfortable smiles before turning away. They had all heard Eleanor's version of the story for so long that it had become the truth. I was the selfish young mother who had run off, leaving her responsibilities behind. I found my friend Sarah near the food table. She wrapped me in a hug. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "What Leo did in there was horrible." "I'm fine," I said, my voice hollow. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be," she said, her eyes flashing with anger on my behalf. "After all these years, you'd think they would show you some basic human decency, especially today." "Decency is not Eleanor's strong suit," I replied, scanning the room. I saw Leo standing with a group of his friends, laughing at something one of them said. He looked so much like Mark at that age. It was a fresh stab of pain. Eleanor was a few feet away, accepting condolences, playing the part of the grieving mother perfectly. I knew I needed to try to talk to him. I had to. Sarah squeezed my arm. "Be careful, Laura," I nodded and made my way through the clusters of quiet conversation. As I approached Leo, his smile vanished. His friends fell silent, suddenly finding interesting spots on the ceiling to stare at. "Leo," I said, keeping my voice soft. "Can we talk for a minute?" He sighed, a put-upon sound that grated on my nerves. "About what?" he asked. "About what you said in the church," I said. "It was hurtful." He shrugged, refusing to meet my eyes. Grandma's speech was long. Everyone was thinking it. "You didn't say it to her," I pointed out. "You looked right at me." "Look, Laura," he said, finally turning to face me. His eyes were hard. "I'm not doing this today. My dad just died. Can you not make everything about you for once?" The accusation felt like a slap. "Make everything about me?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly before I forced it back down. "Leo, I am your mother." "My mother is over there," he said, gesturing with his head toward Eleanor. "She's the one who was there every day. She's the one who went to my parent-teacher conferences and my baseball games. She's the one who raised me. You just sent a card once a year." "I try to do more," I said, my voice pleading. "You have to know that. I wanted to be there. She wouldn't let me." "Yeah, that's her story," he said with a cynical laugh. "She says you were too busy with your own life. She says you didn't want the responsibility of a kid. She said you thought she could give me a better life, so you let her." Every word was a perfectly crafted lie, polished and smooth from 2 decades of telling. It was the narrative she had built, brick by brick, and my son lived inside it. He believed it with all his heart. "That is not true, Leo," I said, my voice shaking with the effort of staying calm. She twisted everything. She lied to you. She lied to your father. You're the liar, he shot back, his voice low and angry. His friends were now openly staring, their expressions a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. You abandoned us. Dad told me. He said you couldn't handle it. He said he was grateful his mom stepped in to save me. So just stop. Stop trying to ruin today with your drama. Go home, Laura. He turned his back on me then, a clear dismissal. He rejoined his friends, forcing a laugh, pretending I was no longer there. I stood frozen for a moment, the humiliation washing over me in a hot wave. He had not just rejected me, he had condemned me, using words his father and grandmother had fed him his entire life. It was their victory, their final, perfect triumph. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me. I saw pity in some, and a cold satisfaction in others. I turned and walked away, not back to Sarah, but out the back door and into Eleanor's manicured garden. The cold air felt good on my burning cheeks. I sank onto a stone bench, the carefully arranged roses and hydrangeas a stark contrast to the chaos in my heart. He believed them. After all this time, he truly believed I was the one who had walked away. My attempts to be in his life, the letters, the calls, the legal battles, had all been reframed as the desperate, dramatic actions of an unstable woman trying to disrupt their perfect family. I took out my phone. I didn't need to find the voicemail. I knew it was there. I thought about playing it for him right then, just walking back in there and forcing him to listen. But what would that accomplish? He would see it as another attack, another piece of drama. Eleanor would spin it somehow. She would say I had manipulated a child, that I had coerced him into saying those things. She was a master of twisting the truth. To defeat her, I needed more than just one piece of evidence. I needed to dismantle her entire story. My gaze fell on the window to Mark's old study. It was now Eleanor's home office, but I knew some of his things were still in there. Boxes of old papers he had never gotten around to sorting. We had moved them here from our marital home when he had finally, officially, moved back in with his mother after our divorce. He was always sentimental, a hoarder of memories. And his mother, for all her meticulous control, rarely threw anything away that she considered part of the family history. A new plan began to form in my mind. A colder, more calculated plan. Leo had told me to go home. And I would. But not before I looked for the truth in a house that had been built on lies. I stood up from the bench. I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a mother on a mission. And I would not fail again. I needed an ally, or at least someone who wasn't actively against me. My eyes scanned the living room through the glass of the patio door. I saw Mark's sister, Chloe, standing alone by the fireplace, nursing a glass of wine. She looked as out of place as I felt. Chloe was a quiet woman, a high school librarian who had always seemed overwhelmed by her domineering mother and assertive brother. She had never taken sides, which in Eleanor's world was a sign of disloyalty. I took a deep breath and went back inside. I walked over to her. "Chloe," I said softly. She jumped a little, startled.
"Oh, Laura. I'm so sorry."
For everything, her eyes were kind. They were Mark's eyes, but without the shadows.
"Thank you," I said.
"Can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said, glancing nervously toward her mother, who was now holding court on the other side of the room. "I need to get into Mark's old study," I said, keeping my voice low. "There are some papers of his I need to look for. Personal things." Chloe frowned. "Mom has it set up as her office now. She keeps it locked most of the time." "I know," I said. "But you have a key to the house. Maybe you have a key to the office too?" She bit her lip, hesitating. "Laura, I don't know. Mom would be furious if she found out. What are you looking for?" I decided to trust her, just a little. "The truth," I said simply. "Chloe, you were there back when Mark and I first went to Dubai. You remember how it was supposed to be. Temporary. Just 2 years." She nodded slowly. "I remember. Mom told everyone you were struggling, that you needed a break from being a mother. She said you were overwhelmed and that she was just helping out. There it was. The beginning of the lie. The seed from which the whole poisonous tree had grown. That's not what happened, I said, my voice tight. She pushed me out. Systematically. And she convinced Mark to help her. Chloe looked down at her wine glass. I always thought something wasn't right, she confessed in a near whisper. The way she talked about you. It was always with this pity. Like you were a broken thing. But when I was around you, you never seemed broken. You just seemed sad. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine.
He loved you, Laura.
My brother. In his own way, he really did. He was just weak when it came to her. I know, I said. That weakness cost me my son. Chloe, please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I just need 10 minutes in that room. She thought for a long moment. I could see the internal battle. Years of obedience warring with a flicker of doubt, a sense of justice long suppressed. Finally, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. There's a back staircase from the kitchen, she said. It leads up to the second floor, right near the office. Everyone is in here. No one will notice. I'll go up first and make sure the coast is clear. The key is on the ring with my car keys. It's the small brass one. Meet me in the kitchen in 5 minutes. It felt like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I went to the kitchen under the pretense of getting a glass of water. I saw Chloe slip out a side door that led to the garage. A minute later, she was back, avoiding my eyes as she walked past me and up the narrow, creaky stairs at the back of the kitchen. I waited, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear the low hum of conversation from the living room. Any moment, Eleanor could walk in. Then, Chloe reappeared at the top of the stairs and gave me a quick nod before disappearing again. It was my signal. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my shoes silent on the worn carpet runner. The second floor hallway was dim and quiet. The door to the office was slightly ajar. I slipped inside and closed it gently behind me, turning the old-fashioned lock with a soft click. The room was neat and orderly, just as I expected. A large mahogany desk dominated the space. Filing cabinets lined one wall, and a bookshelf lined another. But in the corner, there were 3 dusty cardboard boxes. They were labeled Mark, Personal. My heart leaped. I knelt down and opened the first box. It was full of old college textbooks and photo albums. I flipped through one. There we were, Mark and I, 19 years old, smiling at a concert, unaware of the future waiting for us. I felt a pang of sorrow for those 2 kids. I closed the album and put it aside. The second box was more promising. It was filled with letters and documents. I started digging through the files, my hands moving quickly. There were old bank statements, car titles, and then a thick manila folder labeled Correspondence. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was full of the letters I had sent to Mark while he was in Dubai. Hundreds of them. I had poured my heart out in those letters, telling him how much I missed him and Leo. Tucked underneath my letters was another folder, this one labeled Correspondence, Mother. I opened it. It contained the letters Eleanor had sent to Mark. I started to read. Her handwriting was a perfect, elegant script. The words were poison. Laura called again today. One letter began. She was quite hysterical. I had to tell her Leo was sleeping. He gets so agitated after he speaks with her. The doctor says it's best to maintain a calm and stable environment. Her constant disruptions are not good for him. Another one read, I know this is hard for you, my dear son, but you are doing the right thing. Leo is thriving here. He thinks of this as his home, and of me as his mother. It is the natural order of things. When you come back, we will be a proper family. Laura can go on and live her life. She is still young. She can have other children. I felt sick. It was all there in black and white. A calculated, deliberate campaign to poison my husband against me and erase me from my son's life. She had painted me as unstable, hysterical, a danger to my own child's well-being. She had framed his kidnapping as a noble act of salvation. Mark, alone and thousands of miles away, had believed her. He had chosen his mother's lies over his wife's truth. I kept digging. And then I found it. It was a copy of a legal document. It was the petition for adoption. And attached to it was a sworn affidavit from Mark. In it, he stated that I had shown a pattern of emotional instability and had voluntarily relinquished parental duties. He had signed it. His signature, the one I knew so well, was a final, damning piece of evidence. He hadn't just been a passive victim of his mother's manipulations. He had been an active participant in the theft of our son. I felt a cold rage settle over me, a rage so pure and clean it burned away the grief and the sadness. They had not just taken my son. They had slandered my name, my character, my very identity as a mother. They had worked together to destroy me. I took out my phone. I took pictures of the most damning letters. I took a picture of Mark's signed affidavit. The quality was not great in the dim light, but it was clear enough. It was proof. Undeniable proof. I put the letters back in the folder, my movements precise and deliberate. I put the folder back in the box and closed the lid. I stood up and unlocked the door. The house was still quiet. I slipped out of the room, went down the back stairs, and walked out of that house without saying goodbye to anyone. As I drove home, I did not cry. I simply planned. The wake had been their stage, their performance. But the show was not over. There was going to be another act. And this time, I would be the one directing it. And everyone, including my son, was going to see the truth. The days following the wake were a strange, quiet storm. I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The grief for Mark was still there, but it was now intertwined with a sharp, clarifying anger. It wasn't just about Eleanor anymore. It was about Mark, too. About the choice he had made, the betrayal he had signed his name to. He was gone, and he couldn't answer for it. But his mother could. I called my friend Sarah and told her everything I had found. "Oh my God, Laura," she breathed into the phone. "That's monstrous." "It is," I said, looking at the photos of the letters on my phone. "It's worse than I ever imagined." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "I can't just drop this bomb in the middle of everything. It has to be the right time, the right place. I need it to have the maximum impact. I need Leo to see it. I need everyone to see it." "A family dinner," Sarah suggested. "She'll have one soon. She loves playing the grand dame, the grieving matriarch holding her family together." Sarah was right. Eleanor thrived on an audience. She would absolutely host a dinner to celebrate Mark's life, an event designed to cement her control and her narrative. That would be my stage. A week later, the invitation came. Not from Eleanor directly, of course. It came via a text from Chloe. "Mom is having a small family dinner on Saturday night. For Mark. She wants you to be there." "Does she now?" I murmured to myself. It was a power move. A summons. She wanted me there as a prop, the sad, discarded first wife, a testament to her own enduring importance in her son's life. She had no idea I was bringing a script of my own. "Tell her I'll be there," I texted back to Chloe. I spent the next few days preparing. I printed high-quality copies of the photos I had taken of the letters and Mark's affidavit. I put them in a large envelope. I also transferred the audio of Leo's voicemail from my old phone to my new one, making sure it was easily accessible. I practiced what I was going to say in my head, over and over. I didn't want to be emotional. I wanted to be factual, precise, and unshakable. The night before the dinner, I called Chloe. "I need to ask you a favor," I said. "Anything, Laura," she replied. Her tone had changed since the day of the wake. The doubt I had planted had clearly taken root. "At the dinner tomorrow night," I said, "Eleanor will try to control everything. She will tell her stories. I'm going to tell mine. And when I do, she is going to try to shut me down. She is going to call me a liar. I need you to not let her." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What are you going to do?" Chloe asked, her voice wary. "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. "With proof. I found things in Mark's office, Chloe. Letters. From her to him. It's all there. How she lied, how she manipulated him, how she stole Leo from me." I heard her take a shaky breath. "I knew it," she whispered. "I always knew something was wrong. Yes, Laura. I'll back you up. I won't let her silence you. Thank you, Chloe, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. That's all I need. The next evening, I drove to Eleanor's house. I was dressed simply, in a dark blue dress. I carried a small purse, with only my phone and the envelope inside. I felt strangely calm. The fear and uncertainty were gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I walked in, and the scene was exactly as I had pictured it. Eleanor was at the head of the dining table, with Leo on her right. A few other relatives were there, an uncle, an aunt, a couple of cousins. They all looked at me with a mixture of surprise and apprehension when I walked in. Chloe gave me a small, nervous smile from her seat across the table. Laura, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. How good of you to come. We were just sharing some fond memories of my dear Mark. She gestured to the empty seat at the far end of the table, the one furthest from her and Leo. The outcast's chair. I walked to the chair and sat down. Leo didn't look at me. He was focused on his grandmother, hanging on her every word. The dinner was an ordeal. Eleanor dominated the conversation with stories that always circled back to her. Mark's successes were her successes. His life was a testament to her excellent mothering. She painted a picture of a perfect mother-son bond, one that I had apparently been a brief and unfortunate interruption to. I ate my food in silence, letting her talk. I let her build her stage, let her arrange the lighting, let her feel completely and utterly in control. The uncle, Robert, a man who had always been firmly in Eleanor's camp, raised his glass. To Eleanor, he said, "A rock for this family. The mother Mark always deserved, and the one Leo was lucky enough to have." Everyone murmured in agreement. Leo smiled at Eleanor, his eyes full of adoration. That was my cue. The performance was about to begin. I waited until the dessert plates were cleared. Eleanor was just launching into another story about Mark's childhood. I cleared my throat, not loudly, but just enough to interrupt her. She stopped, her eyes narrowing at me. "I'd like to say something," I said, my voice calm and even. Eleanor forced a smile. "Of course, Laura. We'd love to hear a memory." "It's not a memory," I said, looking around the table, making eye contact with each person before my gaze landed on Leo and then, finally, on Eleanor. "It's a correction." A tense silence fell over the table. "A correction?" Eleanor repeated, her voice losing its sweetness. "I don't understand." "You've all heard a story for the last 20 years, I said, my voice gaining strength. "The story of how I abandoned my son. How I was an unfit mother. How Eleanor, in her infinite generosity, stepped in to save him." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Tonight, I'm going to tell you the real story." "Laura, this is hardly the time or the place," Eleanor said, her voice sharp. "We are here to remember Mark, not to air your grievances." "This is exactly the time and the place," I countered. "Because this story is about Mark, too. It's about the choices he made and the choices you forced him to make." "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her composure starting to crack. "You are upsetting everyone." "Am I?" I asked, turning to Leo. "Are you upset, Leo? Or are you curious? Don't you want to know why the woman who gave birth to you wasn't at your baseball games?" Leo looked from me to his grandmother, his expression confused and conflicted. "She told me," he said, his voice quiet. "She told me you didn't want to be." "Did she?" I said, my heart aching for the boy who had been fed so many lies. I reached into my purse and took out my phone. Let's start with a phone call. From a little boy who was 7 years old. A little boy who missed his mother. Eleanor's face went pale. She knew. In that instant, she knew exactly what I had. "Don't you dare," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "I dare," I said. I pressed play. The sound of a little boy's voice, small and trembling, filled the silent room. "Laura? Is that you?" The crackle of the old recording was haunting. Then came the sob. A desperate, heartbreaking sound. "Why don't you want me anymore? Grandma says you gave me away because you didn't love me. But I miss you."
Can you come and get me?
I'll be good. I promise. Please come and take me home. The sound of his own childhood grief echoed around the table. Leo stared at my phone, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. He looked like he had been struck. He slowly turned his head to look at Eleanor. "What is that?" he whispered. He was a confused child. Eleanor said, her voice high and shrill. "You had upset him, calling all the time. I was protecting him from your emotional instability." "Was that what you were doing?" I asked calmly. "Protecting him? Or were you poisoning him?" I reached into my purse again and pulled out the large envelope. I opened it and took out the printed copies of the letters. I slid one across the table to Leo. It was the letter where Eleanor told Mark that Leo was thriving with her as his mother and that I could go have other children. Leo picked it up, his hands shaking. He read it. Then he read it again. The color drained from his face. He looked up at Eleanor, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "You wrote this." "It's taken out of context," Eleanor sputtered, looking around the table for support. But no one would meet her eyes. Chloe was staring at her mother with open disgust. Uncle Robert was suddenly fascinated by his water glass. "Then let's add some context," I said, my voice like ice. I took out the copy of Mark's signed affidavit. I didn't give it to Leo. I held it up for the whole table to see. "This is a sworn statement from your father, Leo. Signed by him. It was part of the adoption paperwork. In it, he states that I, his wife and the mother of his child, had a pattern of emotional instability and had voluntarily relinquished parental duties, words I'm sure his mother helped him choose." I placed the paper on the table. The room was utterly silent, except for the sound of Leo's ragged breathing. He looked from the letter in his hand to the affidavit on the table, and then to the woman he had called Mom his entire life. The woman who was now staring at me with pure, undiluted hatred. "You lied," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "All this time, you lied to me." "Leo, darling, you don't understand," Eleanor began, reaching a hand toward him. "Don't touch me," he yelled, recoiling from her as if her hand were a snake. He stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You lied about her. You lied about my dad. You lied about everything." His eyes filled with tears, tears of a 20-year-old man and a 7-year-old boy all at once. "My whole life," he choked out. "My whole life is a lie." He looked at me then, his expression shattered. It was not a look of love or forgiveness. It was the look of a person whose entire world had just been demolished. He didn't say another word to me. He turned and ran from the room. I heard the front door slam shut a moment later. The spell was broken. Eleanor stared at the empty doorway, her face a ruin. The matriarch was gone. In her place was just a bitter, exposed old woman.
Chloe was the first to speak.
She stood up and looked at her mother. "How could you?" she said, her voice shaking with a rage I had never seen in her before. "He was your grandson."
"She was your daughter-in-law."
"How could you be so cruel?" Eleanor didn't answer. She just continued to stare at me, her eyes burning. "I think we should go," Uncle Robert said, pushing his chair back awkwardly. He and his wife practically fled the room without another word. The other relatives followed suit, mumbling excuses. No one wanted to be in the wreckage. Soon, it was just me, Eleanor, and Chloe left at the table, surrounded by the remnants of a dinner party that had turned into an execution. "You've ruined everything," Eleanor finally whispered, her voice raspy. "No," I said, standing up and gathering my papers. "You did. You ruined everything a long time ago. You built a family on lies and cruelty. All I did was turn on the light." I looked at Chloe, who was now crying softly. "I'm sorry, Chloe," I said gently. She shook her head. "Don't be. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I never said anything." I walked out of that dining room and out of that house, leaving Eleanor alone at the head of her empty table. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a profound, aching emptiness. I had won. I had gotten the truth out. But I had no idea if, in the process, I had lost my son for good. I didn't hear from Leo for 3 days. They were the longest 3 days of my life. I didn't call him. I knew he needed space. He needed to process the fact that his entire childhood, his entire understanding of his family and himself, had been a carefully constructed lie. I stayed home, jumping every time the phone rang, my heart sinking when it wasn't him. Chloe called me the day after the dinner. "The family is in chaos," she said. "Uncle Robert called me this morning. He said he and Aunt Carol talked all night. They can't believe Mom was capable of something so evil. They're looking at everything differently now, all the little comments and slights over the years." "What about Eleanor?" I asked. "She's locked herself in her room," Chloe said. "She's not speaking to me. She tried calling Leo, but he's not answering his phone. She's completely isolated. She got what she wanted for 20 years, and it all fell apart in 20 minutes. "I'm sorry you're in the middle of it," I said. "Don't be," Chloe said firmly. "This was long overdue. Thank you, Laura, for being brave enough to do what none of the rest of us ever could." Her words were a small comfort, but they didn't ease the knot of anxiety in my stomach. The family's opinion didn't matter. Only Leo's did. On the third night, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find him standing on my porch. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd had on at the dinner. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice rough. I nodded, stepping aside to let him pass. He walked into my small living room, the one he had never been in before, and looked around, seeming lost. "I've been driving," he said, not looking at me. "Just driving. I couldn't go back to her house. I slept in my car last night." "Leo," I said, my heart breaking for him. "You can stay here. There's a guest room." He finally looked at me. His expression was a mess of confusion, anger, and pain. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you let me believe all that for so long?" "I tried," I said gently. "So many times I tried. But you wouldn't listen. You couldn't. She had you convinced I was the enemy. If I had come to you with those letters a month ago, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought it was just another one of my dramas?" He looked away because he knew the answer. He wouldn't have believed me. "That voicemail," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't remember leaving it, but I remember the feeling. I remember being scared all the time. I remember missing you so much it hurt. And she would tell me that the feeling was bad, that it meant I was being ungrateful. She said you were gone because I wasn't a good enough boy for you to stay." I closed my eyes, a fresh wave of hatred for Eleanor washing over me. To do that to a child, to her own grandson, was a cruelty beyond comprehension. I walked over to him, and, for the first time since he was a toddler, I put my arms around him. He was stiff at first, then he just collapsed against me, his body shaking with sobs. I held him, my own tears streaming down my face, and just let him cry. I was finally holding my son again. He stayed with me that night. We didn't talk much more. The emotional toll was too great. The next morning, I made him breakfast. He ate in silence, looking around my kitchen.
"It's small," he said.
"It's mine," I replied. A few days later, I got a call from Mark's estate lawyer. He asked for a meeting with both me and Leo. We went to his office together. The lawyer, a kind man in his 60s, looked at us over his glasses. "Mark had 2 wills," he explained. "There was the official one, the one his mother is the executor of. It leaves the house and his primary assets to her, with a trust for Leo, Eleanor's final victory, I thought." But the lawyer continued. "However, years ago, Mark set up a separate life insurance policy. A very substantial one. He also had a private investment portfolio. He named the beneficiaries of these assets in a separate declaration, filed directly with the financial institutions, bypassing the will entirely. He slid a document across the table. He named you, Laura, and you, Leo, as the sole, joint beneficiaries of both. It seems Mark wanted to provide for you both, but he did not want his mother to know about it, or to be able to control it." I stared at the paper, stunned. It was a fortune, enough to change both of our lives completely. It was Mark's final, secret act. A confession and an apology all in one. A recognition of the family he had broken, and a quiet attempt to mend it after he was gone. It was weak, and it was late, but it was something. I looked at Leo. He was staring at the paper, his expression unreadable. He lied to me, Leo said softly. He told me he agreed with her, that it was all for the best. Maybe he was a coward, I said. Or maybe he was trapped. Maybe he was both. But he did this, Leo. He did this for us. The money gave us freedom. Freedom from Eleanor. Leo moved in with me permanently. We started the slow, awkward process of getting to know each other. It wasn't easy. There were 20 years of lies and silence between us. Some days were good, filled with hesitant questions and shared stories. Other days were hard, shadowed by the ghosts of what we had lost. Leo confronted Eleanor one last time. He went to her house to pack his things. I waited in the car. He was in there for an hour. When he came out, his face was pale but set. I told her I know the truth, he said as he got in the car. I told her that she's not my mother. She's my kidnapper. I told her I never want to see her again. The family, for the most part, sided with us. Chloe became a regular visitor at my house, forging a new relationship with her nephew, one based on honesty. Uncle Robert and his wife sent a card, apologizing for their blindness. Eleanor was left alone in her big, perfect house, with her perfect stories and no one to listen to them anymore. My life is quiet now. Leo is in college, studying to be a teacher. He calls me every day. Not Laura. He calls me Mom. It's a word I thought I would never hear from him again, and every time he says it, it heals a small piece of the past. The wound is still there, a scar that will never fully fade. You can't get back 20 years, but you can build a future. Sometimes I think about Eleanor, alone in that house. I don't feel pity for her. I don't feel anger anymore, either. I just feel a quiet sense of justice. She had spent 2 decades controlling the narrative, making sure her voice was the only one that was heard. Now, her world is silent. And the silence, I've learned, is a punishment all its own. She finally learned what it feels like to be erased.